qualified to speak primarily on the virtue of the fact that I'm a father. I'm a father of two lovely daughters. My first daughter is Toluwani. She's 18. She's a freshman student of the University of Georgia. And my second daughter is Ifetomiwa. Ifetomiwa is 15, and she's going into her final year in Daywaterman College. My parents are both late now. My dad passed about 3 years ago at the age of 90. My mom passed about 10 years ago at 74. So that, in a nutshell, is who I am on the family front. Professionally, I run Karat Aluminium. Karat Aluminium Limited is a company that's been around for 25 years. We manufacture windows and doors, aluminum roofing, frameless glass products, and a number of other products in the construction industry. We have offices in Lagos and Abuja.
Thank you for that intro.
You're
Over
welcome.
to you, Dayo, please.
Yeah, thank you, Bimbo. It's my pleasure to be here on this program. I've been part of all the Agbajowo series from inception, and it's a privilege for me, to be speaking, on this particular series, this particular one. Well, my name is Dayo Adebayo. I'm a barrister and solicitor of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. I'm the managing partner of a law firm called Adebayo and Adebayo Legal Practitioners. I'm happily married to BC Adebayo. BC, she's also a lawyer. She's a co-partner in the law firm. She's a realtor and an auctioneer. We've been married for about 27 years. November 20, we'll be celebrating our 27th anniversary. The 27th anniversary of our marriage. A happy father of 4 children. The first of the children is Oluwadamilola. Oluwadamilola is 25 years old. He studied international relations at University of Leeds. Then he had his master's in communication, media communications at University of Cardiff. It's 25 years, like I said, and is now the co-partner of a consulting firm called Aegis Blue here in Nigeria. The second is Angela Olua. Angela Olua is 23. Angela studied pharmacy at University of Nottingham, United Kingdom, and is a qualified pharmacist, now works in the United Kingdom. The third is Titilola Olua. Titilola Olua, she's a female. The first 2 are men. Titilola Olua is she recently graduated just some 3 days ago from University of Nottingham in law. And we have the baby of the house, Oluwafikunlami, who is 15. And she's going to SS2 in a few months' time. That is on the family front. Unlike my friend and brother Tunde, I say my parents are alive, over 70, over 90, and both of them are still kicking, So it's a privilege really to have them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on the graduates. So we go straight to the questions. Please, house rules. If you have any questions, please write them on the chat group. I'll start with you, Dayo. Yeah. What was your relationship like with your parents while growing up? Can you say you know your dad? You say that just the topic for today. Who was your dad?
Thank you very much. But the relationship is ongoing. I mean, there are several phases in this relationship. There is the phase, when you are dependent on them. There is a phase, when you are independent. And the third phase is when they are dependent, So all these phases play themselves out, in our relationship. To a large extent, I would say, yes, I know my dad. We have a very cordial relationship. In fact, if we don't talk in 24 hours, it's, even at his age, it's very rare. I mean, he puts a call to me, and before I sleep, when I remember, oh, I've not called him, I quickly put a call to him. So we compare notes, we talk. He's one of my mentors. I understand him. I mean, he poured a lot into me, and I took a lot after him. In a nutshell. But one of the things that endeared me to him, is his transparency. You can read through him. He has no hidden agenda. It's very plain. I mean, it relates with us, particularly when we became adults, as contemporaries. We talk, and when we talk, there are no holds barred in our discussion. So I really, really appreciate his honesty. And one thing that stood out, for me, and which I will never forget in my life, on experience, when he was retiring, he retired about 30 years ago, and I had the privilege to drive him to his retirement party. So I drove him to that party, and because of that reason, I was allowed in because it was his office that organized the party for him. And when we got in, then they were saying so many things about him, And somebody said he admired my father because for 10 years, because of his belief, because he was standing for the truth and justice in his place of work. It was denied promotion for 10 years. He served that company for 30 years, but for 10 years, it was denied promotion. Immediately I heard that, my mind played back, to those 10 years. And I tried to imagine, was he brash? I said, no. Did we notice anything unusual? I said, no. It was just his normal, and he was going through that type of pressure at his place of work, Then I had greater respect for him from that day, and it taught me a lesson, how to balance work, and family life. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. My dad was 80 last week, and my siblings and I, we tried to put words together on how to actually say something about him. And we were all consistent, a disciplinarian, a man of immense principle, an honest man. When we're growing up, he used to listen to us, even though he was in the army. He would do what he wants to do, but he gave us the audience to always hear us out. So he was a listening father, very humble and very honest in his ways. So I feel the way you guys spoke about my dad, it was all consistent about being disciplined, a stickler for time. So it's always good to know who your dad is. It shouldn't be something different from what people are saying outside. Thank you very much for that. Tunde, I'll just ask you, would you say that...
Congratulations.
Thank you. Would you say that your children know you? Do your children know? Do you think they know you?
I believe so. I believe my children know me very well. I would even qualify it. I believe they know me very well. I was having a conversation with my daughter yesterday, which somehow illustrates this fact. The older one, who is currently in the US, she couldn't come home for the summer because of coronavirus. So we have maintained the communication via WhatsApp primarily. So I don't know what led to the story, but we were talking about a strict, we were talking about why Nigerian parents tend to be very strict, So I then mentioned that, but I hardly beat you guys. Okay, she said, she said she thinks that as much as she doesn't like the fact that Nigerian parents tend to beat their children, but that she feels that she will end up beating her children once in a while, because she feels if children don't do the right thing, how do you get them to do the right thing? That she feels once in a while she might beat her children. So I then mentioned that. I said, but I hardly beat you. She said, yes. She said, but in spite of that fact, that I had a way of making sure that they did the right thing. That they always were cautious not to get on my wrong side, but not because they were afraid that I would beat them, but that they somehow still had that fear of, we must not upset daddy. So she then said, but she remembers one occasion when I beat her, and that when she thinks back, so we had this conversation and discussion about that incident. And I said, do you know why I beat you that day? Let me just take 1 minute and digress and tell you the story of what happened. And on that day, she was going for an event in school, and she wore my wife's ring, my wife's wedding ring, and she didn't come back home with it. So she lost the wedding ring for a day. And when my wife was looking for the wedding ring and asked her about it, she then said she took the wedding ring. My wife said, why? Why did you take the wedding ring without telling me? She then said, I told you. My wife said, no, I don't remember you telling me. So she said, do you remember that after I dressed up and I told you I wanted to borrow some things from you, after I dressed up, I came to you and I said, is everything I have taken okay, right? Without mentioning, I mean, the only thing she took was the necklace and a couple of other obvious things. But she said she wore the wedding ring. She didn't mention that I'm wearing your wedding ring as well. She just said, everything I've taken, is it okay? So my wife said, oh, it's fine, it's okay. So she left. Of course, my wife did not imagine that her wedding ring was one of the things. She came back without a wedding ring. So I asked, why did you do that? And she said, I showed her, I asked her if everything I had was okay. So I beat her that day. So I asked her, I said, do you know why I beat you that day? She said, I know. That I said, it wasn't the fact that, I said, I was upset you misplaced the wedding ring. I said, the wedding ring I bought for my wife, you misplaced it. I was upset about that. But what I found most upsetting was the deception that you put into asking for that thing. That if you asked directly and said, Mommy, can I take your wedding ring? You know the answer would have been no. So you decided not to ask directly, but you decided to give yourself a cover if she says you didn't ask. So you asked, is everything okay? While your hand wasn't showing, so she didn't know you are taking the wedding ring. So I said that act of deception speaks to a character trait that I wasn't happy with. And she said, I knew that I know the things that upset you is if someone is not truthful. The mistakes is not a problem. But if you are not truthful or something that speaks to character, then that's a big problem. So she narrated my thought process, and I knew that she knew what the issue was. So I would say that is just one illustration, a very recent one. There are many instances where I feel that they do know me very well.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. I'm happy that she said that even though you maybe should probably be growing up, my daddy was like firm and she tried to walk around it. So what are the three things that you think a father should be talking to his children about specifically? You know, just three things, basically.
Well, three things. I would say values, and that may have already come up in what I said earlier. A father has to pass values to the children, both in terms of what they say and in terms of what they do. because children tend to listen to what you say, but ultimately they tend to do what you do. So if what you are saying and what you are doing are not the same, they will more likely gravitate towards what you are doing. But of course, teach them about values. Secondly, and of course, values can differ from every family. Values, integrity, honesty, hard work, respect, dignity of the human being, regardless of social status or financial standing and things like that. So you want to teach all those values to your children. Then you want to give them wings. You want your children to aspire to be the best they possibly can be. So you want to continue to tell them what they can do. You want to be their number one cheerleader. You want to give them confidence. You know, there is this thing I learned some time ago that a child or anybody's self-esteem is determined by what they think the most important people in their lives think of them. Of course, as a parent, you hope that you're one of the most important people in the lives of your children. So what you say to them every time will have a big effect on their self-esteem. So you want to say positive things into their lives. You want to build their confidence, let them know what they can achieve. Of course, there's a line to draw. You want to strike a balance. You don't want them to just think they are entitled and they are the best thing that ever happened since sliced bread. You manage it. The third thing that I would say, I'm a Christian, and my Christian faith plays an important role in just about everything I do. So for me, the third thing I would say is you want to lead them in their faith. With my Christian, I know that only they can eventually choose to give their lives to, or to choose to embrace the faith. But as a father, you want to continue to do what you need to do and to say what you need to say to keep them in that proximity with your faith.
Okay. Thank you very much. I re-emphasize what you said about they listen to what you say, but do what you do.
Yes.
Very profound. So we have to be careful what we do in front of them.
Yeah.
Dayo, please, I will go to you for that question too. What are the three things, so that we can expand on it for our viewers, for our listeners? What are the three things that you'll be talking to you should be talking to your children about now, or fathers should be talking to the children about now?
Yeah, okay. The way of the Lord, I mean, we all belong to different faiths, but for me, the way of the Lord is very paramount. And for me, you can deduce a lot of values. The scripture that comes to my head, I don't want to sound very churchy, is the book of Ephesians. I think it's Ephesians 6:4. Yeah, where it says, you know, where fathers were enjoined, it says, and you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up the training and admonition of the Lord. So the first thing, you know, for family is to try, since they were very young, to bring them up in faith. And it's not a one-time thing. We grow with them. I know while the children were in school, the first three, you know, my wife and I, we spent time to go to school with them. I mean, periodically, she goes one term, I go the other term. One of the major things we do is to read, portions of the scripture. We might decide to take the attitude. We go into the scriptures, we pray about it, we talk about it. Then I remember, you know, when you are still in secondary school, we have a day, you know, on Wednesdays we fast as a family. You know, but we never knew they took it to school. So we were in school, and the principal said something. He said, "Oh, we know the Adebayo children. They are very unique." He said, "One thing about them is, you know, they skip their meals on Wednesdays, morning and afternoon, and they eat in the evening." So I was shocked. You know, because we never told them to take it to school. It's something we do when they're on holidays and something. So it shows us that, I mean, they imbibe some of these practices. Although, I mean, we don't do it together as a family anymore, but, you know, it's been part of them, and they can now take it to their own family if they want to continue with that. You know? So the second thing is identity. You know, we are very strong on our children knowing who they are, you know, because there are a lot of identity crises, you know, in this world. So we reinforce that each time, and we tell them, just can't do, you can't be like the Joneses. You can't do what other children are doing because you are just different. So they have identity, you know, which again, we built, you know, from when they were very young. Then the third thing I would teach them is delayed gratification. You know, wait for your time. Don't be in a hurry. Don't be anxious. You know, I mean, don't join the hush puppies of this world. Hard work pays. Be consistent. And at the end of the day, you will be rewarded, you know, if you are focused. So that are the three things in a nutshell, you know, I will emphasize and I will reinforce for the children.
Thank you very much for that. The hard work pays is something that it's an issue right now. We're all in the microwave era and fast track. Everybody wants it to happen now. But I would re-emphasize that hard work pays, consistency, very important. So the next question goes to you. There was a parent and a grandma that actually sent a message to me when she saw the title of this program that we're doing. And she said, it's high time, Bimbo, that we talk to fathers, because they actually think the responsibility of parenting is just for the mothers, and they've left mothers to do it. And a lot is happening now that even mothers, even people that have their mothers and their fathers together and things like that, it takes a whole village to raise a child. So co-parenting is very important. So I'm going to ask you directly, is it enough for a father to provide? Is that just what the father should do? Why aren't fathers co-parenting their children?
Okay. Obviously, I don't believe for a second that it's enough for a father to just provide. And there is a lot for fathers to provide, you know. It's not just providing the finances, you know, because even that word provide, some people narrow it down just to, once I drop money, I pay school fees, I provide food in the house, I buy a few clothes, and children sometimes still have to, they have to write the names of some books that don't exist in order for them to get money to buy clothes. You know how it used to be when we were growing up. Interestingly, you said that question was posed to you by a grandmother. I don't know if I'm being naive, but I honestly believe that a lot has changed since that time. Many fathers I know today are very actively involved in the raising of their children. You know, just about all the fathers I know. I don't know whether I'm just, maybe my subset is not a representative subset of the society, but if I compare fathers, my age level fathers compared to the fathers of our own parents, the fathers tended to believe that it was all about dropping money. But these days, I know that most fathers are a lot more involved. You see, the influence of a father on a child is so immense that if a man decides to abdicate that responsibility in the name of just providing finances, there is a lot of influence that he is leaving on the table. You know, so I listened to a statistic some time ago on this Jim Daly's Focus on the Family program, and teenagers that grew up without a father in the house were, I mean, teenage girls or teenage pregnancies, right? Teenage pregnancies was 45% more predominant in families where the father was not actively involved in the upbringing of the child. You know, that's a huge percentage to say that. So it's almost half. There's a 50% higher chance that a child who got pregnant in teenage years came from a home where the father was not actively involved. So, of course, beyond just preventing teenage pregnancies, in developing values, in providing balance, so many ways where the father's influence is important. And then in the words, a father's word to a child carries so much more weight, even more than the words of a mother.
Mm.
You know, we know that I learned many things from him. And if I did something and anybody told me, Tunde, you messed up, you know, I would be concerned about what they said, but I might think about it for some time and then move on. If my dad said he was disappointed with anything I did, it would dwell with me for a long time. I would really look inwards and say, what can I change? How can I make it better? And how can I even show him that I have learned from this experience and turned a new leaf? So the words of fathers are so important, and that just shows the influence that fathers have. So they need to make the best use of it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. You know, there was a day I was talking to a 50-something-year-old man, and from what I saw, he still needed that validation from his dad. He was doing exceptionally well in his life and business and everything, but there was something missing. Why is it that, Dayo, this is to you, why is it that fathers kind of, they don't know how to show, they don't know how to validate their children? You know, there are many older men that are actually broken. And most times it's like they can't give what they don't have. Okay, so even though when they were growing up, probably the upbringing was very unstable, and maybe they actually vowed that they would never bring up their children that way. But why that? Why that? Why can't factor? Why do they relieve what they've had in the past?
Yeah, thank you, Bimbo. You said something, you know, you cannot give what you don't have. Do what I call default parenting. Most times, you know, generations to generation, what you pass is default parenting. But if we look at it very carefully, so they want him to be a man. They don't want him, to show signs of weakness. They want him to be bold and brave. You know, so they take him away to be raised by another father eventually. And when this guy is raised, he becomes a king. And again, the cycle continues. Leave kingship aside. You know, it's very, it's not our culture, going back to the traditional setting now, to see the children milling around the fathers, because the fathers are believed to have more serious things, yes, than playing with the children. So they rather talk to their mates, they play drafts, take palm wine with their colleagues, and the children, in fact, what they say to the women sometimes is, look, you are talking like a child. To say, look, so they rate the women and the children together. So then, look, you are like birds of the same feathers. So go to your mom. So there is no interplay, there's no interaction between, fathers and the children. And I learned someone, it's very, how will I put it, prominent pastor in Lagos State was sharing his experience. He said he never had a hug from his father all his life, except when he was coming to Lagos. That day, he went to his father and said, and he was grown, he's done his NYC and all this stuff, and he said he was coming to Lagos. And the father prayed for him. And after the father prayed for him, the father gave him a hug. And he felt that vibration. He felt that connection. And the two of them wept. You know, look at what the father denied that child all the years. You know, if my son passes now, I call him, come. I just give him a hug. I say, oh, Daddy, why did you say I should come? I say, I just want to give you a hug, you know. So, I mean, one day, we can have hugs 3 times. It's non-verbal connection. But fathers don't have that, you know. So culture as denied fathers, that's very important role. And children are alienated from the father. So by the time they grow up, they find that there's no connection at all between them and the father. There's no middle point. You know, they've not engaged in conversation all through their life. So by the time the fathers need them, the fathers are old, you know, the fathers realize their mistake, they talk to the children, you know, and the children, they are not even picking their calls anymore. And that is why you see the father complaining, oh, that you only sent for your mother. Oh, they will send for their mother for when they have children or something, and they will just abandon the man there. Because again, that relationship has been seriously damaged growing up. So, like I said, it is in our culture, and it is what we've been passing on from generation to generation. Let me give you this example in the scriptures. Remember when Jesus was with his disciples and the children milled around him. And the disciples said, look, in the serious, we are doing business here. How can you be milling around Jesus? So they sent them away. I just said, no, you are getting it wrong. Send them away. The children, let them come to me, you know. So he rebuked them and said, look, let them come to me. I want to enjoy them. I want to have a rapport with them. You know? So we're bringing our children to us. They are generation next. They are the ones to carry on a legacy. You know? They should learn, the ropes. They should understand us, you know.
Thank you very much. To open up to our children, we should learn to be vulnerable towards them, and we should just be there, try to relearn those things that we've culture actually put in us, basically. And that's why we're having this kind of experience where we can share ideas, basically. Tunde, I'll go straight to you. Many children see their fathers in a different way from the way people see them outside. You know, if you want to know about yourself as a father, your children are they will tell you who you are, what you do, basically. So, but most in our culture here, most parents and most fathers paint everything as if it's perfect. And what do you think about that? How do parents or fathers act their vulnerable sides to their children? Now, this pandemic is here. A lot of things are going to happen. Businesses, some people lose their jobs. Some children have to change their schools and things like that. It's very important for fathers to be able to communicate many things to their children so that they can have understanding and even share their own stories about when things were not working and things were not perfect. So what do we need to tell fathers about this? Being plain, sharing experiences of when things were good, bad, when they were younger. What I think that will actually help the connection to their children. I want you to emphasize on that, please.
Okay. I remember growing up, my dad had this very close friend, and his nickname for his friend was TA. That's his friend's initial. So he called his friend TA, and his friend called him GO, which is my dad's own initials. So I remember they used to tell us then, like most Yoruba parents, most Yoruba fathers told their children that when they were in school, they were childhood friends. So I think they went to the same school. When they were in school, GO always came first and TA came second. And occasionally, when TA came first, GO would come second, you know. And I guess the other 30 children who are in the same class were also in the eyes of their own children, coming first and second as well. So I wonder how many who came third and fourth in those classes, you know. But in our own generation, I don't think people of our own generation tell those stories to their own children, and we should not. We should tell our children. We should let them know we are not perfect, you know, because integrity is a very critical component in you having a connection with your children. If they don't believe you anymore, then you have lost a very important tool of connection. So I don't think we should, our children don't expect us to be perfect, you know, they don't expect us to be perfect, so we don't have to play perfect to them. As a matter of fact, it is sometimes in the place of our confessed imperfection that the strongest connections can be made. I would have given an example, but maybe because I consider it fairly private, and if I had discussed it with my younger daughter before, if I knew this question was coming up and I had discussed with her beforehand, maybe if she was okay for me to share it, I would have. But there was an incident just about 3 weeks ago between my daughter and I realized she was upset about some. Well, she wasn't upset, but something touched her. Something touched her emotionally. I sensed that it touched her, so I went to her room and tried to talk to her. And she tried to say, "Daddy, don't worry, it's not a big deal. I'm not." But I knew that she was more touched than she was making out. And I was in the study. She just sent me a text message. It was when I read that text message, I saw beyond what she wrote. I knew she had thought about something and it touched her. So I got up from my work and I went to meet her in her room. I sat with her and it turned into a 1-hour conversation in which I told her things I had never told her before. And I could tell at the end of that, that there was a connection that was stronger, that thing that happened that could have been negative was successfully turned into a positive. And I made myself vulnerable, told her many things, and we were both better for it. So I think fathers should not, you know, men tend to put on this bravado, like nothing can touch you, you've always been perfect, you are infallible. I don't think it helps us very much. You know, if we are vulnerable and we make our weaknesses known and we say, yes, we have failed before in certain areas and this is how we overcame it, it can only be a positive, not a negative.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Please, if you have questions, type them out on the chat. We're going to take questions after we finish with the panelists. Please ask your questions on the chat. And you know, what you shared now is very critical in the lives of these young children, the teenagers, the young adults. You know, the times we're there, but we're not there. They want to talk to us, but we're not listening, you know. But you were very sensitive to your daughter at that time, and you went to her. You have to be able to ask questions, you know, be in their space, but give them space so that you can get to know about what is happening to them emotionally, to get to connect, whether they're male or female, because the male child, it's as if you shouldn't express yourself or emotions and everything. So it was very critical that you did what you had to do. And I'm very happy that you took that opportunity and you didn't let it waste, because it could have affected her and she wouldn't have anywhere to express herself. So thank you very much for that. Dayo, you know, with the surge of rape, substance abuse, depression, suicide, and all those things going on everywhere now, especially with the young adults, you know, even the younger ones, the preteens, they're thinking about so many things. When we were younger, we used to play outside. Trouble only came to you when you went outside, but now trouble comes into your home. You know, the internet and so many things to talk to children about as far as these vices now. You know, the societal vices, there's so many things out there, praise for money and everything. What are the critical things, you know, in a very, very short answer, please, that they can, that we should be talking to them about now? We're all at home. So this is the time we need to catch our children's attention.
Yeah, thank you, Bimbo. Well, one thing parents will keep themselves in is they should get a good grasp of parenting tips. Life is in phases, many are in sizes. As the children grow, there are some specific things, you know, that you should teach them, age appropriate things. And at some point, you emphasize and reinforce those things. For example, I mean, you talk about substance abuse and all the likes. Well, to start with, these are signs of maladjustment. There are times these children from very good homes, they get involved in some of these vices. And the reason why they get involved is because one of the reasons, don't let me say that's the sole reason, is because they want to get the attention of their parents. I remember I had a case once, I mean, I was at the EFCC, and then they brought in this very young boy, handsome, it should be about 16, 17. And they asked him, where's your dad? The dad was separated from the mom. So he said, oh, I've not seen my dad, in years. Where's your mom? He said, my mom is in Dubai. She traveled to buy food. Who are you staying with? Your friend. But he's committed an offense. And it's what you've done. You will see your parents anymore. So what I'm trying to say in essence is a call what will be put to the mother at that time. The mother will jump on the next available flight, probably. So sometimes they are just frustrated. Children themselves, they are frustrated. They don't know how to handle it. They want to talk to you, they can't reach you. And when they can't reach you, it plays out so many things. It plays out in abuse, I mean, substance abuse to fill their void. It plays out in sexual immoralities to fill their void. I like to give this example, the example of David. Sorry, I keep on going to the Bible, but it's very instructive. David was very successful as a king. I mean, it was a man after God's heart. He won all wars, except the battle in his own home. In his home, his children committed incest. One son, raped, his sister. There was murder as a result of that in the same home. Then there was rebellion, by Absalom against the father in the same home. But I was in the train, then there was a flashback to all the things we've said, all the training we've had, all the conversation we've had, and as all these things began to play back, I was comforted that he will be able to stand his own, in the midst of all that chaos. So then, of course, just to reinforce, this identity thing, you should know who you are, and you not, mess up with it. Then again, I told them that, look, do not be found in an uncompromising position, with any female. Because they are very young and innocent. I said, look, by reason of the color of your skin, you are vulnerable. They will listen to any other lady, particularly if she's white. So know the type of jokes, I mean, because he's a people's person and he cracks a lot of jokes. So know the type of jokes, I mean, you crack. Know the type of, position you take with them. So, and we said all these things, but several years down the line, they are all done through school, and we thank God kept them, and there's no incident. But again, all these things kept pouring in and pouring. We poured a lot to them, and I think it worked.
Thank you very much for that. You said something, and I'll ask Tunde. Most of us allow our children to go abroad to school, and so by the time they come back, there's a lot of cultural diversity. Many things change, and how do we accommodate that? Because we're the ones that we want the best for them, so we allow them to go to have a world and global view about so many things. But even when we let them go away, there's a lot of differences in the culture. And by the time they come back, many things will have changed about them. That's one question. The other one that also relates to the fact that for parents that have their fathers that live in Nigeria and have their families abroad, how can they also stay connected? Even though they're away from their parents, from their family, and from their children. So it's two questions in one: the children that go abroad early, and because of the cultural difference in there and coming back home, there's some things that we see them do, but we don't want to accept, but we're the ones that have allowed them to go to another culture. And the second one is fathers that have the children abroad and they're here. How do they stay connected so that they continue with the values that they instill in them? Tunde, that's to you.
Okay. The first one, when we send our children abroad, knowing that we are sending them to a different culture, first of all, personal opinion, I think before we send our children abroad, they should have attained some level of maturity, right? And then we should do our level best to impart as much of our values into them from early age, so that if they have developed some values before they go to a different culture, it helps them to be able to resist what you would consider the negative side of the new culture, to a large extent. I mean, people are going to be part of the environment in which they live. However, you want to be sure that they imbibe the positive things, because there are positive things in those cultures that are things to learn from. And there are negative things that are things you want to avoid and insulate yourself from as much as possible. I believe it's possible for a child. Everybody is a product of their environment. There is that common debate about nurture versus nature. When you have a child, the nature that the child gets, maybe from the genes of the parents, has an influence on how the child turns out. Then the nurture is the environment in which the child is brought up. Both of them will have an effect. What you want to do, hopefully, if the nature you transfer to them is positive, you want to then make sure that you give them very good nurture before you throw them out there. But eventually, you will have to release them. And when you do, you should stay connected. As I said, hopefully you will have put a lot of values into them before they go. Someone can be in an environment and not be totally inundated by what is happening in that environment, So that is one. We don't have to just throw our hands up and say because they've gone, so therefore they must, it's all change now. We want them to change in the positive ways, and as much as possible, not to change in the negative ways. As I said, we must stay in touch with them. If the world is such a global village now, if your child is 7,000 kilometers away, it doesn't stop you from communicating. It doesn't stop you from having influence. Now that my daughter, who I said she's in the US, she can't come home because there are no flights, coronavirus and all that. So this is her first summer away from the family. But we speak almost every day. And some of those conversations, 3-4 hours, video calls. Sometimes it's 4 hours phone call. It's almost like she's here. And with my younger daughter, the one that is here, they do Netflix party. So they want to watch a movie, they are watching it together and they are gisting about it. So it's almost like she's here. If I call her audio call, she will cut it off and call back video call. I said, no, I don't want audio call. I want to see your face. I want to you know. So because of that, the connection is maintained in spite of the distance. So if our child is away from us geographically, they don't have to be away from us emotionally. And I think I said daughter. So it's for boys. Sometimes I tend to think in daughters, right? I forget that some people have sons. So anytime I say your daughter, just know that I'm talking about your child. It can be your son or your daughter. Briefly on the second part, when a father is in Nigeria and the other part of the family is abroad, if you are talking of father alone in Nigeria and then the mother and the children are abroad, jokingly, I tell my wife, when my wife talked about those families, I tell my wife, I said, if you would like to live abroad, I'm not in a hurry to go and live abroad. But if you would like to live abroad, just do me one favor before you go. Just look for one nice young lady that you like and choose her by yourself and give me the wife that will stay with me when you go. So that it won't be somebody that will be competing with you. It will be someone you chose by yourself. You know, I just joke with her like that. So what I'm trying to say is I don't particularly like the idea of a father being alone. For me personally, I know one day my daughters are going to leave finally, but as much as I look forward to that day, I also don't look forward to it. But for my wife to also live with them, that fight plenty small.
All right. Thank you very much for that. You are being sincere. Please,
Yes,
we're going to take questions, and please don't forget to send your questions to the chat. I have a question here already, and it says, how does a father go about mending a broken relationship with his children? Dayo, I'll give that to you. How does a father go about mending a broken relationship with his children?
The first thing is to be honest, about, should I say failure? Because it's not done the right thing at the right time. So you should first, be humble enough to admit that, yes, things have gone wrong. I've not played my role, in your life. So, but now I'm ready. There's always that hunger, whether we like it or not. There's always, that craving, especially both for the boy or the girl, or for the man and the woman, yearning for the father. That's the way God has programmed it. I watched a documentary not long ago, and this lady was raised, by foster parents. She was very comfortable. She was happy. But when then she got to meet her father, before marriage. She's graduated and all this stuff. And she has a foster father one request. He said, yes, you've trained me, you've been good to me, you've been kind, I'm so grateful. Which will be very controversial. I first thought it was controversial for me. I couldn't immediately understand it. He said, can you allow my natural father to walk me down the aisle? Just that, give me that, oblige me that request, So it's by some controversial, but what happens is that every child, yearns, for the father, and longs for the father. So it's not very difficult for children to forgive their fathers if they are very honest enough, if they are very, humble enough to admit their failing, and again, be willing, because it's for one thing for you to say it, another thing for you to walk the talk. I also remember this situation, and this happened to some of my class, my schoolmates. The father was an absentee father, also, but when he was about to die, he, made the request. He wanted to see all the children, so all the children went to see him, and he carried them, as old as was, carried them, the children on the laps, one by one, he hugged them, cried, they all cried together, you know, but it was never there for them. You know. And those children, you know, immediately they forgave the father. It was like, you know, all the years that they missed, you know, that singular day, that singular event made up for all the past years. Of course, it won't make up for it, you know, emotionally, but that single day there was forgiveness. You know? So again, you know, father should be honest enough to say, yes, there's been mistakes in the past. If you want to give us, reasons for it, you can give reasons for it. But again, whatever time you have remaining, you know, then start from there and bond with them, you know, and never let them leave your radar, you know, for one day. I think that's really mine.
Thank you very much. You know, many parents want to involve in their children's life, but they don't know how to. Okay, you've mentioned a few, Tunde and Dayo, but some children are born out of wedlock, and some children are born maybe when the father was younger in those days of rascality and things like that. And so the children are labeled in a particular way because they're not with their father. And even though some of them want to try to be part of children's life, some mothers, their mothers don't want them to be part of the children's life. So some children are used as a weapon between the father and the mother, probably married or not married. And that affects the children emotionally. They're neither here or there. How can we advise to the fathers that they want to be part of the child's life, but they're not allowed to, and some don't even want to be part of their child's life because the child was born out of wedlock? How do we manage that situation for the sake of the child?
Well, it's a very challenging situation. What I believe is that there is no illegitimate child, because I know one of the common labels that's given to children out of wedlock, they call them the illegitimate child. You know, there is no illegitimate child. You know, if someone is illegitimate, you might say it is the father that is not taking responsibility for the child. You cannot label that child as illegitimate. What happens, the scenario that comes to my mind is maybe the child was born out of wedlock. The man, whether he was still a boy at that time or he was already an adult, decides not to take responsibility for the child or decides not to marry the mother of the child. So, as Dayo mentioned earlier, at some stage there is a yearning, there is in the heart of the father. So, at the time when that yearning now becomes apparent, then the mother now decides that you will not see this child, because at the time when we wanted you to take responsibility, you refuse to take responsibility. So she withholds the emotional connection between the father and the child. I would say, in the interest of the child, it's better for the woman to find a place in her heart. Less common, but there's another scenario I can think of, which a child can also be used as a weapon. There's a relationship I know, right? The man was not doing very well. The wife was doing better, and the man felt that his wife was not as good to him as she could have been. Years later, the man suddenly hit some good fortune. Not suddenly, to be fair to him, because he worked hard and he moved abroad. And as a doctor abroad, suddenly his fortunes changed. He was earning loads of money. By that time, he and his wife had separated. I don't know whether they divorced, but they were separated. And this man was spending stupendous money on his children. And I was telling my wife, I said, I think some of these things this man is doing, is not only doing it out of his love for his children, but some of it is to spite the wife, to say, see what you are missing, right? Now that I have arrived and I have this much disposable income, see what you could have enjoyed if you had been kind and nice when I was nothing, in quotes. So I think that's another situation where the man was using the children as a weapon to spite the wife. But all that, in my opinion, also is not necessary. It's not necessary. If you are still haunted by what happened in the past, then deal with the demons of the past. If you have to sit down, I don't know whether either of the two parties has, I think he remarried. So of course there was no going back to what was there before, but he was still consumed with that desire to really to pepper them, but if everybody knows there are things you should do for your children, even when you can afford, there are things you can buy for your children that may not be the right time to buy such things for them. And I know an example my pastor uses frequently is, if you say because you love your child, then your 12-year-old child says, Dad, buy me a Ferrari, and you buy it, you are buying a coffin for the child because it's not in the child's best interest at that age. So that man who is trying to do that pepper them may buy some things for the children that his better judgment would tell him, I shouldn't have bought it. But because of that, his ulterior motive, he goes ahead to do it. So that as well is the best interest of the child. So I think it's just about finding balance.
Dayo, I'm going to this question. It's a very touchy question, but I have to ask it because it's so rampant now. A lot of incidences are out there now that when fathers are having sexual intercourse with their children, and what has actually led to that? What is behind that? It's so rampant now. I mean, hush hush, but it's out there. What do you think? Some people think it's not a cultural thing. It was actually brought in from abroad, but it's happening here, and the case is all over. How can we curb that?
Well, any father that sleeps with a daughter is definitely a product of the demented mind, And, some of these things are not apparent, but again, some men are gradually losing, and because it's a thing of the mind, it's very, visible for people to see. And it's when there's manifestation, that people begin to run helter-skelter. So men are going through a lot of stress. I'm not justifying, it's not justifiable at all. It's a no-no. But again, you see the well-being, the mental well-being of men, is gradually being affected. Self-esteem is being eroded. We're able to study the sociological balance to see whether this happens more among the middle, the lower, the upper class, okay? But then from the stories we hear, you find that it's more in the lower, among the lower echelon of the economy. Then probably in between, you find it could be up there, but hardly reported. So that shows, that there's economics around this. When the man is, when his economics is affected, it affects his self-esteem, it's frustrated, and though he looks physically okay, he's not mentally stable. One of the ways to, express, that frustration or to let out steam, is by sleeping around. When there's a release, of course, there are some hormones, that are released in the process, and after sex, there's a feeling that comes with it, a feel-good feeling that comes with it, and you feel good with yourself. Like I said, I'm not justifying it, You know, now these men, because of their nature or because of what they, I mean, their economic state, probably their wives have left them. So they don't have wives to satisfy, I mean, their sexual desires with. And so many, forces interplay like that. But like I said, what can we do? You know, the first thing I say is that, look, this thing don't start in a day. You have been privileged to read, stories of victims of sexual abuse, particularly when they are from known, when the predators are known or the predators are family members. It starts in a day. It develops gradually. And these children, at times, they hint, particularly the mothers, they give that hint. But the mothers are so preoccupied, probably with the job, or they're so trusting that they are missing the signs. You know, if you say, okay, now, let's go to your mom's house, and the child is saying, no, I don't want to go. No, I don't want, or the child is crying, or the child is trying to hold back, and you beat the child, take a load, let's go. I mean, the child is trying to send a message, but you're not getting that message. If you are going out and the child is being left with the father, stepfather, and the child is holding on to you, no, don't go. I want to go with you. And that's happening, all the time. And you're not saying, oh, something wrong here. Am I missing anything here? And your reaction is to beat the child. Of course, the child will keep quiet. And that will keep on occurring. Then if, like the first thing I say for a father, for daughters, somebody asked me the other time, I said, what is the, first responsibility of fathers to daughters? And I said, for me, the first thing is to keep them safe. Safe from abuse, safe from predators. Just do that. If you affect their self-esteem, if you affect so many things, their balance in life, if they to be abused. So in our house, for instance, I mean, we don't have visitors alone with our children. We try as much as possible. No worker comes in, when I'm not at home, or the mom or the senior brothers are not home. So you can't even leave. So the gardeners, I mean, if I'm not at home, the gardeners don't enter the compound. And so we had so many rules that, and sometimes the children, they don't understand it. If they're not very trusted family members, and when I say trusted family members, that we have the same value. And in fact, that again is very rare. Sleepovers, very rare, when they are younger. So we try to build, that safety net around them. So parents should do that. Mothers should be more discerning. The other time, somebody was reading a letter to me, and that letter was very critical of the father, and it was almost nasty about the father. So, and I said, there's something fishy here. I see something, my spirit is telling me, because it's very unusual for a girl to say all these things about. She was just dancing around it, this responsibility, this, I don't want to move there, this. I said, the mother should probe into this. Because again, it's very witty for a child to say, my father is doing it, especially when you don't have connection with that child. Or my father is doing this, especially when there's no connection. Or my uncle is doing this, especially when she knows that this uncle is your, is the source, of your economy. I mean, probably you send a girl to fish from that uncle, to get handouts from that uncle, and now you want the girl to tell you, that, okay, this uncle is trying to abuse me or violating. I mean, it never happened. And again, we need to tell them, we need to raise confident girls that can talk. One thing is, if people know that your girls can talk, one, and if people know that you are close, to your girls, they won't abuse girls. Because these things thrives on secrecy. Once it's known, even before it happens, when he says, oh, you know what, this uncle puts his hands on my laps yesterday. I mean, then if she knows that your daughter can say that to you, then that uncle will, hardly not try. But if he knows that, look, I mean, that connection is not there, that relationship is not there, you are not talking, then we'll put fear into the mind of the girl, and we continue to perpetuate, that vice.
Thank you very much. So mothers should be very observant. Father should have an open policy. The home front should be an open place where people can interact, and anything that is going, we need to be very sensitive to our surrounding. My daughter just mentioned now that we should not emphasize on daughters because boys are being molested. So we should emphasize on boys and girls, both male and female, about molestation. But the incest normally happens between the father and the daughter. So please let us all be very, very observant. The last question before the final one is to Tunde. Tunde, there's a specific question here for single parents, fathers. How can single fathers raise children? Because we have we have a few single fathers. But how can they raise their children?
Of course, we know of many more cases of single mothers raising their children, right? And I mentioned earlier that I think that there are many fathers these days in our generation. There are many fathers who are very involved, practically as involved as the mothers in the upbringing of their children. If such a father suffers the misfortune of losing his wife one way or the other, and he has to raise his child by himself, it of course means double work, because he will have to be more of a father than he probably would have been. Then in addition, he will now have to be a mother as much as he possibly can. I don't suggest for a minute that a father can take all the place of a mother in the life of a child, but he will have to double up. It's not impossible. It depends on the level of involvement that he had before whatever caused him to now become a single parent. If his involvement was deep, then the transition is not as bad as it would have been if he was one of those fathers who only provided and left everything else to the mom. I think the age of the children will also be a factor. At what age does he now have to take on that bigger responsibility? I think the younger the children are, the more challenging it will be for him, But if the children have grown to some extent before he now has to take on that dual role, then hopefully some things that the mother would have already done for the children would be available for the children to lean on during the times when they don't have the mother. But it's a very challenge. I don't want to trivialize it at all, as if nothing's spoiled now. Man, we just do. It's not an easy thing to do, but it is not an impossible task to face and do it successfully.
Okay, thank you very much. There's a question here. It says, how do you deal with your brother that molested your daughter? And how does she build her confidence back? Somebody asked the question. His brother molested his daughter, and how do you deal with that as a father? And how do you how do you help the child regain the confidence?
Okay, my understanding is that if your daughter was molested by your brother, that is her uncle, is that correct?
Yes.
Well, it's difficult, but I think there is no other way than to treat that uncle like any other person. It's in my case, fortunately, I mean, I have one brother, and there is no chance anything like that could possibly happen because my brother is a person of very high integrity and morals. But for a situation, for someone whose brother does that, I think you owe it to your daughter to not stand by and say, because it is my brother, therefore nothing would happen. You know, you would be failing your daughter if you say, because there's nobody that should molest your daughter, and you would choose not to stand up for your daughter, instead to try to protect the other person. And in terms of gaining confidence back, of course, I hope what the person is saying is not gaining confidence of your brother back, because that person should never be trusted again with your family, with anybody in your family. If someone is a child molester, it is very difficult for that person to now gain trust to be allowed in a situation that could be compromising for children. So I think if someone, I believe in forgiveness. I'm a Christian. I take my Christian values seriously. But forgiving someone does not equate to putting yourself in a position of vulnerability with that person in the future. So you must make sure that there's no gaining confidence of that person again, right? But of course, if to let your daughter gain confidence back, it's a gradual thing. Of course, I have never been a woman before, but what I hear women say about that kind of thing, even older women, when they get molested, it takes a lot of time to get over that situation. So it's not something you can rush and say there is a plan for bringing back confidence quickly for someone that has been molested. Maybe time is the best friend of that person. Time will help to some extent to overcome it.
Thank you very much, Tunde and Dayo. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for giving us this time. And on the final note, before we talk about a call to action, would both of you say, both of you want your daughter to marry men like you, and would you want to turn out to be fathers like you?
Thank you very much. I think minimum. So somebody better, to marry somebody better and vice versa.
Okay, thank you. Tunde, what of you?
Okay, I'm going to expatiate a little bit more than Dayo did. Of course, my wife would say, I guess my wife is watching this. If she's not watching it, she probably watched the recording. And she'll be very interested in my answer to this question, because my wife tells me sometimes, she says, you really think too much of yourself. You think you are a Mr. Perfect, you think you are Mr. Right. You know, you see, I grew up in a family of 5 children. I am the middle son, because of course all 5 of us are still alive. My siblings think I was my dad's favorite child. My siblings also think I was my mom's favorite child. I wasn't a bad child, and not a bad husband, not a bad father. So the answer, really, without being conceited, the answer is yes, I would be delighted for my daughters to marry a man like me. You know, there aren't many things that, of course, I'm not perfect by any stretch, and I have some traits that I don't like that I see in my daughters. You know, like doing things at the last minute, and not being sufficiently time conscious, and there are a number of things like that. But in the important things, in terms of character flaws, in terms of values and things like that, I would say I am proud of the son my parents raised. I think that is the way I would put it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So the call to action, 1 second, please, before we end this session. Call to action to fathers. Can you speak categorically to fathers now, please? Dayo, call to action.
Well, I'm calling on fathers who have gone AWOL, that is absent without leave, to come back home. I mean, the children are yet for fathers. The whole world will be a better place if fathers take their place, in the scheme of things. So let them come home and take up the responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tunde?
Okay, my advice to fathers is that if you make out time for your children and you make sacrifices necessary for you to be there for your children, for you to be there for them emotionally, for you to be there for them financially, for you to be there for them spiritually, it can only be a positive, because when you get older, you will reap the benefits of it. When you get older, it is not the money that you've stashed away that will bring you the most joy. It is the relationships that you have that bring you the most joy in your old age. And when you get older, there aren't many relationships that are as rewarding and fruitful as the one that you build with your children. With my own dad, after my mom passed, my dad survived 7 years after my mom passed. They were very good friends. I remember my dad used to tell us that the only thing left that he looked forward to in life was the days when we visited. So I visited my dad once every 2 weeks. My brother visited the other weekend that I didn't visit. So it meant every weekend, either myself or my sisters are abroad. So my brother and I would alternate and visit. And he always said the only thing he lived for was our visits. So that is how important it can be for you. So you're not just doing it for your children, you're doing it for yourself. So please be forward thinking, be proactive, make the sacrifice now, enjoy the benefits later.
Thank you very, very much for that. I'll give my parting words. It's always said that the end product of parenting is not the child, it's actually the parent. So the fathers are very important in the lives of their children. I'm sure during this pandemic, everybody has had some kind of reflection about life, the important things. What is really important to you? Your family, the connections, the relationships. These are things that we need to think about at this point in time. We've been very busy, the rat race, running helter-skelter. But God has showed us that we're not really in control. And the things that matter are the relationships we build with our children. Fathers, we need you. The mothers need you. Your children need you the more. When children have their fathers involved in anything, it's a different ball game. They build confidence. They're sure there's nothing they cannot do because they have their father's backing. Many people have gone to trainings on finances, how to get your bill back and things like that. But as have fathers called their children together to have meetings with their children, how are they feeling? Some children are going through different emotions now. Some people are not, they don't know what to do about their school, what course they're going to study, what class they're going to go, are they going back? So many more, they're not even sure what is happening to them right now. So this is a call on fathers to go back home. Tomorrow is Sunday. Reflect on what we've shared with you today. In the next couple of months, it's going to be December. Yes, you might not have made any money this year, but remember that this builds a new relationship with your child. How do I want my winter years to be? One thing, and I know that even if I didn't make any, I had a beautiful reflection on my relationship with my children, and I'm taking bold steps to make it better. There's nothing wrong in asking your child, how can I be a better father to you? This is a question that every father should ask their children at this time. It's very critical. It's important, not just for your child, but for you. I am Abimbola Somolu, Director of Bimbo Family Affairs, Director of Bimbo Family Affairs Support Center, where we provide counseling for people and any nature to do with life. And of course, we provide services for organizations on emotional, life matters or professional matters. Look at your chat. We have all our social media handles there, our telephone number, everything you need to contact us. But this is a clarion call to everyone on this platform. Thank you for listening. Have a fantastic 2020. It hasn't ended. This is a session for you to re-energize yourself and be the best father you can possibly be. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Dayo and Tunde, for your time. Everybody on this platform, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time coming here to listen to what we have to say. Have a fun day. The best year ahead. Now, the decisions you make. Thank you.